we're big believers in writing, kind of that Amazon white paper, 5-pager, 6-pager approach. So, one of the big, kind of cornerstones and backbones of our business is data and technology. And so, for us, it's how do we use data? How do we build arguments? How do we write those down and provide, a strategy and a roadmap? And those living, breathing documents are great reference points for our people as they think about solving problems, right? We write it down, we review it, we come up with a cadence, and then we execute against that.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? Every company I know has to go through strategy changes or major pivots. Well, today's focus for the interview is leading through a major pivot. We have a conversation I think will really help you because we've all been through some difficult times. We've all had the challenges of leadership through these difficult times, and especially with this pandemic thing that has happened and hit us, and then all the other things that have cascaded down around it have really caused us to really look at our businesses, and we've probably changed a few things. So today we're talking about leading through a major pivot. We're with the co-founder of Freightplus, Stephen Aborn. They were number 783 on the Inc. list this past year, and it really is a great conversation. We talk about how important employees are to the entire operation of any business that's scaling fast, and how critical they are, and how they're the number one asset. We'll find out exactly why inside the episode today, but we also look at what does it take for you as a leader to engage these people in a different way. And I think what he shares with us is something that people will say, but maybe not apply as well as they could. So you have to tune in to figure out exactly what that is. When we talk about leadership, hopefully you're thinking about how do you grow as a leader? How do you evolve? How do you push yourself? Maybe you even think about how do you scale your team through the next level, and how do you support them and develop them? Because that's one of the biggest challenges I think a lot of companies have. Well, that's where I step in. My name is Gene Hammett. I'm a coach to founders, CEOs, and their teams to help them through growth, and I can help you figure out exactly how to be the most effective leader you can be. In fact, my job is to help you be an extraordinary leader. If you want to have a conversation about what's getting in the way of your leadership and the growth of your company, all you have to do is go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. We'll get to know each other. We'll have a few questions that I walk you through. I'll give you some insights back to reflect back on what's really going on to help you create a plan forward. This is not a sales pitch or a call. This is really a chance for me to serve you. So take it for that, and go ahead and reach out to me at genehammett.com and go to schedule your call right now. Now, let's get into the interview with Stephen. Stephen, how are you?
Good, Gene. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. Excited to talk to you today about leading through, pivots and difficult times. But I want to check in with your company first. So tell us about Freightplus.
Sure. So Freightplus is a managed transportation service. So we focus specifically really on high growth companies in middle market firms. So managed trans is a little bit different in the logistics space. It's really kind of a Fortune 500, type of business model. So, it's really a completely, I would think about it as an outsourced logistics partner. So we provide everything from technology to customer service to data and analytics for our customers. And you usually see this a lot with larger companies. And I think where we've been successful is kind of taking that Fortune 500 mindset and best practices and bringing it to companies that really need it in high growth environments. And with smaller growing businesses.
Stephen, you've come here because you want to talk about what it's like to be leading through a major pivot or a strategy change. First, before we talk about that process of leading, what is the major pivot we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, sure. So when we started trying to grow what is now known as Freightplus, we were actually a consulting company. So we went from a consulting company into really a service provider and data and technology company over the course of it's really kind of a 5-year process. So, we were leading consulting projects for Fortune 500 types of companies that were spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year in transportation, helping them with, best practice, strategy, procurement events, benchmarking, kind of typical consulting type of engagements. And, as we were trying to grow, we started to run into these high growth companies, what might be called middle market companies, right? So companies that are doing, say between $50 and $500 million a year in revenue, or companies that are growing really, really quickly. And what we started to see is a little bit of that David and Goliath environment, where there was a certain set of best practices that held true across every business that we saw at that Fortune 500 level. And when we went down to work with these, really large organizations, in some cases multinational organizations, right? Folks with, European or Asian and American footprints, and they just didn't have the same capabilities, the same access to data, the same level of service from their service providers. And, so for us, it was about, how can we help these companies? It really, how can we be customer centric, and how can we come up with, a service or a suite of services that allow them, to compete with Goliath?
Well, I appreciate you talking about this. I think a lot of companies can relate to going through a change similar. Maybe it wasn't, going from a consulting company to being a service provider like you are today, but that we've all been through some difficult changes and strategy shifts. When you, had to lead through this, what are some of the roadblocks that you encountered on this journey?
Sure. I think first and foremost is the one that's at the top of everyone's mind is we launched this managed trans business in January 2020. So little did we know that about 8 weeks later, the whole world was about to change forever. So I think some of the roadblocks and challenges for us are somewhat business driven and somewhat environment driven. We were growing, we were recruiting, we were bringing on new customers, and we were doing it in a brand new world, entirely remote. So I think a lot of those challenges were like, how do we grow really quickly? How do we maintain the culture that we want? How do we do that in an entirely remote environment?
Well, that's certainly a big challenge that a lot of people have endured. And I know that the supply chain right now is really kind of messed up in a way. I don't know what words you use around your office.
Broken.
Yeah. And there's a lot of factors behind it. I think a lot of people would like to contribute it to one or two things, but it seems like it's a pretty complex set of things that are going on. It's more than just the lack of chips and things like that, and people and things being stuck in ports.
Yeah, absolutely. I think labor, even before the pandemic, truckers and the average age of a trucker, and there were labor shortages there. The average age of a trucker is about 60 years old. They're not typically the healthiest folks. So what we saw at the start of the pandemic was a big pullback on labor. It affects truckers, it affects warehouses, and I think everyone sees that on a day-to-day basis now. It affects their restaurants, right? Our restaurants are closed, our gas stations are closed, there are reduced hours, and it really hit our industry really hard. So I think, in addition to, some of the situations, like you said, at ports or different spaces, like the labor shortages have really hit our industry hard.
I want to turn our focus to this whole leadership side of this. Now that we understand things that were in front of you, the challenges, what had to change in your approach to leadership, Stephen?
I think the scale of it, it went from a 3-person team to a 40-person team awfully quickly. So I think, again, for us, it's really about that problem solving, customer centric culture. And so how do we think about that, and how do we think about developing people and really having champions of that culture as we onboard so quickly? So we're not venture funded. We don't have some of those resources. So we're growing, we're acquiring customers, and as we recruit and bring people on, like, we need to get them as up to speed, as productive, as comfortable, as fluent in Freightplus supply chain managed transportation as quickly as possible. I think our biggest asset is our people. Our people are unbelievable. We really pride ourselves in bringing on strong people. It's our number one corporate goal is hire and retain the best. So for us, how do we hire, retain, and then kind of step 2 is develop the best.
Now, Stephen just talked about going from 3 people to 40. Now, your company probably didn't go through those exact numbers, but you felt the pressure and the change as you've added more people to the mix. And here's the reality, that every time the company grows, you add 10 more people or 20 more people, you have to evolve as a leader. You have to continue to evolve the processes and the systems. You have to evolve your own skills as well. So one of the things that I hear back most about teams as they're growing is communication that when we were smaller is very different as we're bigger. And we have to work through some of those issues, the different cadence and channels. And sometimes there's overload and a lot of noise. And we got to make sure that we're communicating effectively as the company grows. And that's a critical part of growing that we all must understand. Now, there's many other aspects. I work as an executive coach to companies and their teams, and I help them figure out what's missing. And I can help you figure that out too. I'd love to get to know you. But now let's get back into the interview with Stephen. I don't think anybody's ever phrased it that way on here. Number one corporate goal is to select and and retain the best employees? Why is that the number one goal?
I think those are the folks that bring our mission to life every single day. They're also the folks that our customers work with, our carriers work with, and we work on a day-to-day basis. So if we're able to, create a great environment, an environment where people are encouraged to, take on big ambiguous problems, I think the ambiguity of the problems in a new company, you need really smart, driven, ambitious problem solvers in order to succeed in those types of environments, right? This isn't a Fortune 500 company where you walk into a role and there are procedures and process and technology and there's a playbook. A lot of the times we're asking these people to execute on their job and create playbook at the same time. It takes a really unique, talented person to do that, and I think for us, we need to support them with great development, great peers, great leadership, or else, those talented people are gonna go solve problems for someone else.
Well, I know how important people are because nearly every company who's come through this podcast has said that our people are the most important thing, even more important than our customers, which may sound odd for those listening in.
I believe it. Yeah. Yeah, no, I believe it. Great people lead to great customers, and it's absolutely a cycle.
I could go into that, but I want to go dive into this whole aspect of leading through a pivot change or a major shift inside the business. When you look at your leadership skills, what did you have to learn and do differently than you were doing before?
Yeah, totally. I think personally for me, it's kind of communication. My friends would give me crap all the time about communication skills, right? And if you're going to lead an organization and you're going to lead an organization that's growing quickly, you need to figure out how to be a very effective communicator and kind of do that at scale, right? Because as a leadership team, we're asked to come up with a strategy. We're asked to be able to solve high level problems, and how we do that on a day-to-day basis at scale is we communicate, we trade against, we develop kind of those functions, right? And so I think for me, it was really trying to be mindful of how to be an effective communicator and how to get outside of my own personal comfort zone and really help people. And we were talking before the show about how everyone who works here has a personal life and has a family, and when they come to work for you, they buy into you, right? On some level, they buy into your mission, they buy into what you're doing, the problems you're trying to solve, the culture you're trying to create, and so to bring those folks in and then not be a good leader, it's just if you're trying to do things the right way, it's not a great feeling and it's not a great option.
Now, Stephen was just talking about how important communication is to the company and really leading through a major pivot. Well, one of the things that I want you to think about is how well are you listening? Yep, I said it. How well are you truly listening to your people? Are you commonly distracted in meetings, or they feel like you're somewhere else? Well, when I've done some executive feedback sessions where we do a 360-degree view and get feedback from employees, that's one of the biggest things that comes back is, our CEO or our founder team is so much involved with everything that's going on. I feel like they're really not present for the meetings. I'm not sure they're really listening as deeply as they could. Now, that may sting a little bit and it may hit home, but you want to make sure that you're evolving these skills and really working on them because they don't come naturally. You have to be very intentional about it. You're so busy, everything's running at the speed of chaos, but that means you have to listen even more, and people need to feel that you hear them. They need to feel appreciated and valued through all that. So my 2 cents on this, back to Stephen. Well said. Stephen, you really have laid out a lot of us about the changes in the skills that are necessary to leading this team. But you talked about just communicating effectively at scale. What do we see unique in your company that allows you to communicate, I don't know, changes or mission or the necessary things at scale?
Certainly. I think like every effective leader, parts of what we do well is we steal. So before I was here, I was at Amazon. So I worked out at Amazon corporate in Seattle. Did that for a little bit over 2 years. Had a ton of fun learning there. Was had a lot of success. Had a great time, and then kind of moved back to Boston where I grew up to be an entrepreneur and try to build a company. And so how do we do that at scale? Is we're big believers in writing. Kind of that Amazon white paper 5-pager, 6-pager approach. So we one of the big kind of cornerstones and backbones of our business is data and technology. And so for us, it's how do we use data? How do we build arguments? How do we write those down and provide a strategy and a roadmap? And those living, breathing documents are great reference points for our people as they think about solving problems. Right? We write it down, we review it, we come up with a cadence, and then we execute against that.
So without saying the details here, I'm going to put a spotlight on this for a moment, because this is one of the unique elements. If I was going to give you an example, that I would bring this up. Jeff Bezos is fairly famous for an article that was written a few years ago that says, PowerPoint is no longer welcome inside of our meetings. We're going to take a different approach, and we're going to have people write these 5 or 6 page white papers, if you will, and people will literally, I think the article said, we sit in the conference room and we read them silently together, and then we discuss intelligently after that so that we can move forward. Is that what you're talking about with these white papers?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. So we write down the start of every meeting, kind of read the paper, read the document, read the business review, and then go through that page by page and ask questions. So we do that, now we do that. And this was new in 2021. So how do you, I think it goes back to the conversation we were just having. How do you communicate effectively at scale? One of the tools and resources that we have is that QBR process. And I think kudos to our team. We've done a great job. It's uncomfortable for people to write, right? It's different. Yeah. People don't love it, but I think our team's done a great job, leaning in, adopting that culture and really executing.
I appreciate you sharing that with us. There's another question in this, and you may not want to go there because I think a lot of people respect Jeff Bezos, but Jeff Bezos is one of those that has said that customers are the most important thing, not necessarily employees. And he gets a lot of backlash for what's going on in this. And I'm not looking for you to toss stones, but you took a different approach. You've chosen that employees are the greatest asset of the company. Is that a conscious choice or something that just kind of happened as you were growing this business?
I think it was a very intentional choice. I think part of the reason that you go into business, and I have an unbelievable partner. So I should mention Jill Clifford. Jill is an industry. She was a consultant for 20 plus years, worked with companies like Sony, Novartis, was really, she's amazing. One of the leaders in the transportation industry. And so she's the other half, kind of the Freightplus story that I'd be remiss not to mention Jill. But I think, I think what we wanted to create was an environment where we loved coming to work every day. And so in order to, the customers aren't next to us. We love the customers. We do trainings and development around how to be customer centric. It's really at the core of our mission. But at the end of the day, when you walk in the door at Freightplus, the customers aren't here, but team is.
I think that the first time I ever heard of a company getting like a best places to work was years and years ago, because I just wasn't paying attention to it, to be honest with you. But I remember the feeling I felt that if a company is the best place to work, then they probably take care of their employees, and those employees take care of their customers. And so it actually is a good thing if they say customers are not first. Do you have, not that you have to win these best places to work kind of thing, but do you have the same approach to leading this team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the struggles of being in a high growth environment, one of the challenges that we have is that everything and everybody is new, right? And we kind of talked about that, whether that's a process or whether that's technology or a BI dashboard or some kind of an approach to data. Everything that we're building is new. And everyone that works here on some level is new within the last couple of years. And so, how do we recruit and retain great people and then keep them filled and keep them motivated and keep them happy? If you put yourself in a customer's shoes, when I worked at Amazon, one of their practices is people tend to transition pretty quickly. So you tend to work on a business or in a space for about 18 months and then you rotate. In the first place that I worked was in the retail space. And one of the big complaints that these large Amazon vendors would have is, we were just getting up to speed. We just felt like we were starting to execute and speak the same language. We just feel like this person was starting to understand our business and our goals and our strategy and what we were executing against. And then they went off and they worked at AWS or, they went somewhere else, right? So that consistency and that continuity was always a big stress point on our vendors. And I think it's the same thing in our business where we are a logistics services business. If we have an environment that produces a lot of turnover, that is going to flow through into our customers where we are, such an integral part of their business. So we are managing every single shipment every single day, bringing order to a kind of chaotic environment on behalf of our customers who are a lot of them in really high growth environments themselves. The last thing that they want is somebody working on their business for 3 months, 4 months, and then they're gone. And then we put somebody else in and then somebody else in and then somebody else in. They're really looking to us to be, a partner. One of the things that we talk about all the time is how do we think about and look for 25-year plus relationships? Like that's our big goal. We want long-term relationships, and we want long-term relationships with our customers, with our carriers, and with our people. That, we have to think really broadly about that. And I think, to your point, if we do that and we execute against that, it's going to flow through in all of the touch points that we have with outside companies, individuals, or whatever.
I want to ask you one final question as we wrap up today. You've mentioned multiple times about retaining talented people. And I think a lot of leaders are just kind of looking for answers in this area. I know pay is an important factor, but actually the studies show that pay is not the most important factor. So what do you think is really helping you retain the talented employees there at Freightplus?
I think it takes a lot of effort, really on the front end from a fit perspective. Whether it's a customer or somebody who's looking to work here, I think we do a lot of work to make sure that it's a mutually beneficial partnership and that we're thinking about things the right way. And so whether it's a prospect, we've turned plenty of prospects down because they didn't necessarily have the right approach. In our vision and our goals weren't aligned, right? We're not trying, we don't do business the same type of way. We want different things. And I think for us, we have to take that approach with our people as well. How do we, in a high growth environment, you need really a consistent pipeline of people. But as we evaluate those people, as we talk to those people, how do we make sure that they're the right fit and they're the types of folks that want to solve big, ambiguous problems? Again, we often talk about having a culture of problem solvers. So how do we make sure that we're putting people in positions to succeed and then continue to coach them, develop them, have patience with them, excite them, grow them, and invest in them? I think, again, we're fairly new on our journey, but I think that's really our strategy on how we're going to keep really strong people in the long term.
Stephen, incredible conversation. Appreciate you sharing all this wisdom. And how do you lead through a major pivot?
Thanks, Gene. Really appreciate it. It was great talking to you.
And this is a spot where I get to reflect back on what Stephen has said so that you can really, focus on what you want to do next as a leader. He talked about the importance of people, like saying that they're the number one asset inside the company and hiring the right people and making sure they're the right fit. Even saying that, we've let go of certain customers or not brought them on board because we didn't feel like they would fit with our values and the mission of the company and with our employees. It's a really strong place to create a space where people are able to perform at their highest. And so that's the big takeaways I have for today's conversation. It takes a lot of courage to do this. It takes a lot of confidence. A lot of it just is something that comes naturally. But for some people, they need conversations to know what's missing, what's getting in the way of their own leadership. That's where I step in. I love to help leaders figure out where their blind spots are, what's really getting in the way. These are the conversations you're not having with your board, you're not having with your executive team. And I want to have a conversation with you that you aren't having with anyone else. Just go to genehammett.com. You can schedule your call. Inside that conversation, I'll get to know each other, or we'll get to know each other, if you will, and I'll help serve you through this. This is not about sales or anything like that. If you're listening this deep into the conversation, absolutely want to be a better leader, I can help you figure out exactly what's missing and what the path forward for you. Just go to genehammett.com, schedule your call. When you think of leadership and you think of growth, think Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. See you next time.